So there's this new federal bill on the table that could totally change how things like internet and wireless towers get built in your town. It's called the American Broadband Deployment Act, and believe me, it's a whole new playbook for how cities and telecom companies are going to have to work together.
Have you ever really thought about it? When a new cell tower pops up or a bunch of new cables get strung along your street, who actually gives that the green light? For as long as most of us can remember, the answer has been pretty simple: your local government. But, well, that might be about to change in a big way.
You see, this new law, the American Broadband Deployment Act, it has a very different answer to that question. The whole idea behind it is to speed up getting fast internet to everyone, everywhere, by creating one single, uniform set of rules that every town and city has to play by.
Okay, so let's get right into it. The first and honestly the biggest change here is a massive shift in control. This act essentially takes a whole lot of the decision-making power away from your local city hall and puts it on a new, federally mandated track.
And the engine behind this shift is a little concept called deemed granted. It sounds kind of technical, but the idea is actually super simple and incredibly powerful. If a company submits an application to build something and the local government doesn't approve or deny it by a very strict new deadline, that project is automatically approved.
And look, this isn't us just reading between the lines. It's written right there, black and white, in the law. Section 101 says it plain as day. If the government fails to take final action, the request shall be deemed granted. There's no wiggle room. Silence now means yes.
The best way to wrap your head around this is to think about an RSVP to a party. Normally, if you don't reply, the host just assumes you're not coming, right? Well, this law flips that completely. If a city doesn't send back a hard no by the deadline, it's treated as an automatic yes. The bulldozers can start rolling, whether the city ever officially said okay or not.
What this all boils down to is something they call a shot clock for local governments. A company turns in its paperwork, and boom, the clock starts ticking. If that buzzer goes off before the city issues a formal decision, either yes or no, the project gets the green light by default.
And we're not talking about a lot of time here. These clocks are ticking fast. A city gets just 60 days to decide on a small antenna on a light pole, 90 days for other small stuff, and even for building a brand new tower from scratch, the deadline is only 150 days. You can imagine the kind of pressure this puts on city planning departments, which are often already stretched thin.
And the limits on local control don't just stop with that shot clock, oh no. The act takes away a bunch of other tools that cities have always used. First off, it bans moratoriums. So a city can't even hit the pause button on new applications to catch its breath and update its own rules. Second, while cities can still have some rules about how things look, they can't make those rules so tough that they basically block a project. And finally, the FCC gets the ultimate trump card. It can just step in and cancel any local law that it thinks gets in the way of the act. The takeaway here is pretty clear, right? Local control is being systematically reduced.
All right, so that's the loss of control. The second huge piece of this puzzle, you guessed it, it's about the money. Beyond just taking away decision-making power, this act completely rewrites the rules on how communities can charge for the use of public land. So here's the new rule, the guiding principle for everything. Any fees a city charges must be based on actual and direct costs. Now, that little phrase might sound harmless, but it represents a massive change from how cities have managed their property for a long, long time. To really get a sense of how big a deal this is, let's look at the before and after. Before this act, cities could often treat the space on their utility poles or under their streets just like any other landlord would, as a valuable asset that you lease out for what it's worth. That's all about to change.
So check this out. In the old system, cities could often charge market rate fees. Now, nope. They can only get back their direct costs. Like the cost of the staff's time to review the paperwork. Those negotiated fees to offset a project's impact on the community? Gone. And those in-kind deals where a city might say, sure, you can build here if you run free internet to the public library. Those are now banned. Basically, cities are being told they can't manage public property like a revenue-generating asset anymore. Instead, they're just bookkeepers, only allowed to get back what they spend.
Okay, and if you think that's a big change, hold on. Let's talk about cable franchises because this is a complete overhaul of how they work and it really hits home on the money issue.
Yeah, this one's a big one. For decades, the deal with the local cable company came with an expiration date. When the time was up, the city and the company would sit down and hammer out a new deal. Well, that's gone. Poof. Under this act, once a franchise is granted, it just keeps going. Forever. No renewal necessary.
And once again, the law is completely blunt about it. Section 203 says a franchise continues without any requirement for renewal. The only way it ends is if the company decides to quit or if the city can prove in court that they broke the rules on purpose. And let me tell you, that's a really, really high bar to clear.
So what does that mean in the real world? Well, that renewal process was a city's main point of leverage. It was the moment they could renegotiate fees to keep up with the times. It was when they could push for better service or ask for upgrades. And if a company sold its local network to someone else, the city could often charge a fee. All of that power, all that leverage is now pretty much gone.
Okay, so we've talked about control, we've talked about money. Let's step back and just look at the big picture here. What kind of new landscape does this act really create for communities all over the country?
So let's just pull this all together. What have we learned? Number one, things are going to get built way faster for providers because of these shot clocks. Number two, cities are going to lose a major source of revenue because they can only charge for their costs, not for the value of their property. Number three, there's a lot less local say in where this stuff goes and what it looks like. And finally, cable deals are now permanent, which takes away a city's best negotiating tool. When you boil it all down, what this law is really doing is presenting us with a massive trade-off. On one side of the scale, you've got this national goal of getting broadband and 5G out to everyone as fast as humanly possible. On the other side, you've got the principle that communities should have control over their own neighborhoods. This act is putting its thumb firmly on one side of that scale.
And that leaves all of us with a really big question to chew on. In this huge push to get everyone connected, what is the right balance? How much local control and local revenue are we willing to trade away for the promise of faster deployment on a national scale? This act gives us one potential answer, and it's an answer that towns and cities everywhere are going to be living with very soon.